Hello everyone, my name is Clyde, and this little ship right here is the one everyone has been talking about. It's the new Tier 10 Japanese light cruiser, Kitakami. Now, Kitakami has 10 quad torpedo launch... Guys, that's the Tier 4. This is the Kuma, come on!
Get that cone out of my face!
This is the Kitakami, and while she looks a heck of a lot like the Tier 4 Japanese cruiser Kuma, she does not play like that ship one bit. Kitakami has 10 quad torpedo launchers, 5 on each side of the ship, which allow her to launch a total of 40 torpedoes in short order, once they're all loaded. She's also equipped with a speed boost and a hull repair, two things you won't find on the Tier 4 Kuma. Few ships have caused as much of a stir in the World of Warships community, with some players being concerned about the ship's torpedo launch potential and others distraught over her incredibly high cost. Wargaming has stated the ship is a reward designed for long-term players with vast resource reserves, and this does seem to be true, as the cost of the ship puts her out of reach for a lot of newer players. In the interest of time, I'm not going to cover the details of the Salvage for Victory event in this video, but I did create a Kitakami economic calculator spreadsheet, which you can use to determine if you can afford the ship during this patch. The sheet takes into account your current resources, the rewards that you will earn or already have earned from Snowflakes, the Holiday and Santa City event, and of course your clan bonuses for both steel and coal. The spreadsheet is available for free. It's a Google Sheet, and I made an instructional video elsewhere on the YouTube channel that I will link in this video's description so you can get access to it right away. For consumables, Kitakami has a damage control party just like you'd expect. She's also got an exhaust smoke generator that lets you hide when you're on the move. Great to get unspotted if you suddenly get spotted and didn't want to be, or good for hiding from airplanes. More on this a little bit later. She's got an engine boost and a very good one, 15% speed bump, which lasts for almost 4 minutes. Again, more on this later. And then last but certainly not least, a repair party, which is really great to have on this ship because she does have a relatively small health pool. Kitakami comes with this very classic green Japanese camouflage, which you're very familiar with. You've seen this camo on many Japanese ships over all of the years that the game has been out. For those of you who've unlocked the alternate color Japanese camo, it also comes in this beautiful blue. We love this blue. This is a really good looking color scheme that they've got on a lot of Japanese ships. Again, not new, but good looking. For those of you who are going to consider going to the 100th stage of Salvage for Victory, you'll be able to get this Ice Peaks camo, which we've been told will only be available during this event this season. You'll never be able to get this again. When you go into battle, you don't have the Christmas lights on the ship, but you do still have all the snow that they show on here. I don't recall if the Christmas trees and presents come with you. I only played a couple of battles with this camo on. I think the camo looks okay, but I don't think it's as cool as the standard camouflage patterns. So for me, I'm going to stop at stage 80 and I'm going to run the blue camo. This is a video in my hot take series, and if you haven't seen one before, I think you're in for a treat. For each hot take video, I compare the ship's capabilities against those of her peers, ships of the same tier and class. We rate each capability on a scale of 0 to 5, with 5 being the best. At the end of each hot take, I share with you my build, and I explain why I put the ship together that way. Sound simple enough? Great. Let's get to work. Kitakami has a very limited gun armament when compared with virtually any other Tier 10 cruiser. She's equipped with just 4 140mm guns that only fire HE shells. I often was trying to swap to HE when I was playing this ship, and every time I double tapped the 2 button, I was disappointed that I didn't have AP shells. But the HE shells actually worked fairly well. What was sort of shocking is that she doesn't have the worst DPM of all of the cruisers at Tier 10. In the most technical sense, Kitakami has better HE DPM than Moskva, Goliath, which blew my mind, Castilla, Yoshino, and Marseille. Her main guns reload in just 3 seconds, and they have a maximum HE damage of 2,700 hit points, with a relatively quick 12-kilometer flight time of just 8.8 seconds. The trouble is, you can only realistically point 3 of her guns at a target at any given time due to the way they're arranged on the bow of the ship. So her 3-gun DPM is actually 121,500 hit points, rather than the 162,000 that's reported on Ship Tool. This is still higher than the HE DPM of Marseille, Napoli, Stalingrad, and it's obvious that the smaller shells of Kitakami are going to shatter more often than the larger shells of those cruisers, and those cruisers aren't really known for their HE DPM. That's the domain of a lighter cruiser anyway, but that doesn't mean that you should ignore using Kitakami's guns. They've got an 11% fire chance, which means you'll spark fires, and if your torpedoes don't quite finish off the target, often you can get the job done with the mains. When you're running in your smoke, the little 140s will only boost your detection range to 4.3 kilometers when you're firing. And that means that in most cases, if you're surprised by a destroyer or some other ship, you can smoke up and farm them from safety without really risking getting spotted. I'm going to rate Kitakami's guns a 2. They're obviously pretty terrible when compared to other tier 10 cruisers, but since the ship sort of squats in this strange no man's land between torpedo destroyers and torpedo cruisers, they really complement her exhaust smoke generator and torpedo armament very well and should not be ignored as a source of damage, however small. The torpedo launchers on Kitakami are unique in that they don't reload like any other surface ship that you're familiar with. Instead, her launchers reload like those found on submarines. On most ships, each torpedo rack can load or reload entirely independently of the others. You can imagine that each launcher has a team of sailors assigned to it, responsible for loading it with torpedoes whenever it gets empty. Kitakami, on the other hand, operates differently. Instead of one team of sailors per torpedo launcher, there's one team of sailors for each side of the ship. That means that the 5 launchers on each side of the ship load sequentially rather than simultaneously. This has the effect of rate limiting the number of torpedoes that you can launch in a single wave. In my build, the torps reload in 62 seconds, so to reload all 10 launchers at the start of the map takes about 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Now, while that may sound bad, what it really means is that every 62 seconds, you can launch 8 torpedoes, 4 on each side. If you wait 124 seconds, you can launch 16 torpedoes, and so on. With all 10 launchers loaded, no other ship in the game can launch as many torpedoes as quickly as Kitakami. And that's pretty cool, but in reality, it doesn't happen that often because reloading them takes so long, and usually you're going to want to be shooting torpedoes in the interim. I found that I would typically hold out until I had 2 or maybe 3 launchers on each side of the ship loaded, so I could fire off 8 or 12 torpedoes in a salvo, turn the ship around, fire off the launchers on the other side, and repeat. This worked okay, and there were definitely times in the match when you only had 1 rack loaded on either side and you wish you had more torpedoes, but with a little bit of patience, you could still launch big schools of fish at the enemy. To get the most out of this torpedo arrangement, you wanted to have some moments of quiet in the battle that would let you charge up for a big torpedo attack. And this necessitates staying unseen while you reload your torpedo tubes for a while. And we'll talk more about this in the survivability and concealment section of this video. Kitakami has 2 kinds of torpedoes and both have very specific use cases. They both reload in 62 seconds in my build, and they have a base reload time of 81 seconds. It takes a loaded torpedo launcher about 4 seconds to swap from one type to the other, and it doesn't seem to penalize you at all if you choose to change torpedo types mid-reload. The standard torpedoes are 12-kilometer units. They do 11,833 damage base, and they travel to the target at 86 knots. These torpedoes are spotted at a distance of 1.7 kilometers. Kitakami's alternate torpedoes are deep waters, which have identical performance characteristics to those found on Asashio, with the exception of the unique reload scheme on Kitakami. The deep water units do almost 21,000 hit points as their base damage. They travel 20 kilometers and have a base speed of 67 knots. These torpedoes are great for disrupting the positions of large, slow-moving, or even stationary battleships and aircraft carriers, even at long ranges, because you can launch so many of them that you're bound to hit something. They're also pretty hard to spot. They've got a detection range of just 0.9 kilometers, so they tend to be a big surprise for your enemies. Like Asashio torpedoes, the 20-kilometer deep waters cannot target anything except for aircraft carriers and battleships, which means for other targets, you're going to have to use the less potent 12-kilometer standard torpedo armament. The deep waters, of course, have huge damage, and all of my best damage games in Kitakami involved me putting multiple of these torpedoes on target. The standard torpedoes, while faster and useful for more target types, just don't punch nearly as hard as the deep waters. I think people wanted the torpedoes on Kitakami to be massively OP or extremely meme-worthy, and they're kind of just not. Yes, if you're patient and you wait the full 5 minutes and 10 seconds, then you can launch 40 torpedoes, 20 off each side, but you can also do that in a lot of other ships. Brisbane can launch 40 torpedoes every 4.5 minutes. Jinan can launch 40 torpedoes every 4 minutes. And every 5 minutes, it can reload boost and launch another 20. Yodo can launch 48 torpedoes in under 4 minutes. Heck, even Velos, which only has 1 torpedo launcher and is a destroyer, can put out 40 torpedoes in just over 6 minutes. At the end of the day, Kitakami's torpedo armament is unique, and the way that you utilize it is different. It allows for these big waves, but its overall output is actually pretty similar to other ships that you already think of as normal. in the game. I do think that they're a pretty reliable weapon, and it works when you use it well, and it doesn't work so well when you use it poorly. That's a good thing. The torpedoes don't overwhelm you with a sense that you could fill the entire ocean with murderfish, and that's because you can't. While this may be disappointing for some, I think it's the only way the ship could possibly be reintroduced into the game without it causing a bunch of problems. To me, the torpedo operations in Kitakami feel more like they do on a destroyer than a cruiser. After all, she's only 6 meters longer than Haragumo. I'm going to rate her torpedoes a 4 because honestly, choosing a number here was sort of challenging. I could hear arguments for rating her a 3, a 4, or even a 5 in this category, but I think we're just going to hit the one in the middle.
I see 3 of them out there. Get the one in the middle. Right. Hit the one in the middle.
Now, I've seen a lot of speculation online about Kitakami and her ability to stand up to legitimate damage sources. And to be fair, a lot of that speculation is pretty accurate. The ship has a very limited health pool, just 28,500 hit points. And when equipped with the Survivability Expert Commander skill, that number jumps up to a slightly less frightening 33,000 hit points, which is only about 3,000 more hit points than the destroyer Ragnar has. Despite this and her near complete lack of any armor whatsoever, the ship does have a number of tricks to help her stay alive. It's just that those tricks are not more hit points. The first survival tool she has is her concealment. Kitakami is the sneakiest cruiser at tier 10 and by a long shot, with a fully built at-sea detection range of 7.9 kilometers. Carefully played, you should be able to keep the ship unspotted fairly easily so you can focus on your rangy torpedo attacks. For the first 3 or even 4 minutes of the game, it is the most dangerous time of the match for you, as you may accidentally stumble into a destroyer or a submarine at close range when the teams begin to make that first contact. Should you be spotted by a stealthy enemy ship, at this point you can instantly go dark using your second survival tool. This is your exhaust smoke generator consumable, which obscures your ship even when you're moving at full speed. If you're running Superintendent on your commander, you'll have 5 of these charges, so don't be shy about using them as long as you don't believe you're going to be immediately lit up by radar or hydros. The ship also has an above average hull repair module. While her hit point heal percentage is a very standard 14% of total hit points, Kitakami can heal 50% of her citadel damage, while most cruisers can only recover 33% of such damage. Another tool she has is a long-lasting 15% speed boost. I know this is a maneuverability thing, but the ability for the ship to get up and go at high speed for almost 4 minutes is really useful for keeping this thing afloat. Pairing that speed boost with her exhaust smoke generator is also a very powerful combination, as long as you're not subject to radar. Not only are you instantly dark, but you're also screaming towards safety at 43 knots, which I know saved me countless times during testing. Another problem for Kitakami's survivability is the present attitude of the World of Warships community. Now look, I'm not here to scold anybody, but I did feel a little bit focused in this ship when I was testing it. Some players were experiencing some feelings, if you will, about the ship or the salvage event, and they certainly did not hesitate to pop into all chat and tell me what they thought of the ship and that they were going to come and fight me. Right now, I think the ship is a bit of a curiosity, and I think sometimes people just like to destroy things they don't understand. I think many players were very just lovely. They had a lot of questions, and of course, I couldn't answer any of them until this video came out. So I don't believe this will be a long-term issue, but it's something to bear in mind that for the first few weeks, you're going to have a lot of people telling you what their opinion of the ship is. Overall, Kitakami has a lot of tools to help get her out of trouble, more than most ships, if I'm honest, and she's got a reasonable amount of healing as well to recover from making mistakes. She just does not have a lot of hit points to begin with. I'm going to rate her a 3 for survivability, which some of you may think is a little bit high, but I do believe that as you gain familiarity with this ship, you'll be able to make her as survivable as any of your other light cruisers like Smolensk or Brisbane that also like to explode at the drop of a hat. The AA on Kitakami is basically hilarious. Ship Tool says that the ship has an AA strength of 1. 1! 1! Obviously, that makes her dead last out of a list of 37 tier 10 cruisers in the game, with the second worst ship being Plymouth. Plymouth has an AA strength of 41. That is 40 points better than Kitakami. Kita has no flak, It has an AA aura range of just 2.5 kilometers, and it dishes up a solid 9 hit points per second. The good news is that your air detection range is only 4 kilometers, so with a 2.5 kilometer AA bubble, you'll never have to turn your guns on or off with that pesky tilde key. I'm going to give her a 0 in this category, which I think is the first time I have ever done that for a hot take. Kitakami's AA is entirely useless. Your best defense against airplanes, honestly, is pop and smoke. Kitakami has over-the-side depth charges, which dish up higher than average damage, but the lack of air ASW is always disappointing. She also has no secondaries, and her mains are only sort of okay for fighting a submarine that pops up next to you. The 3-second main battery reload on the 140s is decent, but it can be tough to do enough damage to do anything more than just force the submarine to submerge again. She also lacks hydros, so not only is her anti-submarine warfare armament a little bit lacking, she's also sailing blind when she's out there contending with enemy submarines. I'm going to give her a 2 in this category because there are worse ships for fighting submarines in the game, but not that many. The real danger that a sub poses to Kitakami is spotting her, so having a smoke charge ready when you're approaching a cap or unknown waters and you know there's a sub about is a pretty wise move. In my first matches playing Kitakami, I felt like the ship was very slow. In particular, it seemed like she lost a lot of speed when cornering. So after a game or two, I decided to test this theory. First, I compared her top speed to other cruisers to discover she's actually the 3rd fastest cruiser at tier 10, only slower than Spain's Castilla and Italy's Venezia. Second, I wanted to test how much speed she lost when cornering. To do this, I executed a drag race between a Kitakami, a Zhao, Nevsky, Venezia, Minotaur, and Des Moines. Each ship would accelerate to 32 knots as fast as possible, then turn left full rudder for 8 seconds, causing the ship to lose speed. At the end of the 8-second rudder maneuver, the ship would then accelerate in a straight line until it returned to a speed of 32 knots. I collected data from these ships and I graphed everything. I should note that none of these ships had signals, they had no upgrades, and they had no commanders during this test. The graph came out like this. The white line represents Kitakami, and impressively, she even out-accelerated Minotaur, if only slightly. Each line rises to the 32 knot mark and then dips as the ship enters its turn. The further to the left the dip is, the faster the ship was to accelerate. The distance in the height of the line from where the ship hit 32 knots originally to where it reached its lowest speed as a result of the turn shows how much speed the ship actually lost. I decided that it might be easier to show this data in a bar graph, so I created this graphic. The taller the white bar, the more knots of speed the ship lost in cornering. We can see that Kitakami is not exceptional when it comes to losing speed during cornering as compared to other tier 10 cruisers, such as Zhao, Nevsky, or Des Moines. Minotaur lost basically no speed at all when cornering, which I found interesting, and Venezia was the best of the rest. The taller the red bar, the slower the ship was to accelerate. This tells us that Kitakami accelerates faster even than Minotaur, a ship known for its quarter-mile drag times. Upon discovering this, I sat back in my chair and I wondered, why does Kitakami seem so slow in battle? And then, it hit me. At tier 10, Kitakami looks, feels, and even plays like a destroyer. Remember, this ship is a cruiser that is shorter than Elbing. For a destroyer, she would be on the slower side, but for a cruiser, she's actually pretty speedy. This makes rating this ship's speed, its maneuverability, a little bit difficult because by all rights, she is a cruiser. In battle, she will be matched against other cruisers. But she doesn't really play like any other cruiser. Even torpedo-based cruisers like Yodo or Jinan play totally differently from this ship. She plays like a shimakaze. If I compare her against other tier 10 cruisers, she probably earns a 5 in this category. She's top 3 for speed, she accelerates faster than Minotaur, how could she not? And I haven't even mentioned the speed boost module yet. When that speed boost is active, she runs at over 43 knots and this lasts for nearly 4 minutes. I know I've already mentioned this, but I'm hitting that point again. On the other hand, if I compare her to tier 10 destroyers, she's on the low side of mid-pack. She'd probably rate like a 3 or a 2 of a hot take score if it wasn't for the speed boost. And even boosted, she's still not as fast as the fastest ships, Marceau or Kleber or Delmy. I think I'm going to give her a 4 in this category because yeah, she's pretty fast for a cruiser, but her playstyle demands even more speed than most cruisers need. Some might think it's unfair for me to penalize her for being like a destroyer, but I make the rules, so that's how that works. But seriously, if this bothers you, don't let it bother you. Just swap that score in your head if you disagree. All I'm really trying to do here is get you to think about the ship critically. Is Kitakami easy to play? Well, like a lot of ships I've done these kinds of reviews on, Kitakami's not complicated to play. The basic early game strategy is to take up a position in front of your battleships and large cruisers, but behind your destroyers and submarines, so you can launch torpedoes at targets that are spotted for you by your allies. I know, I'm really laying it all out for you here. But while her concealment is really good for a cruiser, staying behind those stealthier allies gives you a couple of advantages. Number one, it takes advantage of their spotting and distracts your enemies with their activities so that you can score large torpedo hits on unsuspecting targets. The deepwater torpedoes do big damage, and they can pass underneath allied submarines, destroyers, and cruisers, plus their 20-kilometer range means that you can affect targets pretty much anywhere on your side of the map. It might make more sense to use your standard torpedoes early in the game so that enemy battleships can take up their positions and start to feel comfortable before you tip your hand with the deep waters. You might also choose to not launch any torpedoes in the first few minutes. Let your tubes load up to where you have 3 or maybe 4 racks on each side loaded, and then deploy a big volume of deepwater torps to make sure that you get multiple hits. Later in the match, when some ships have been eliminated and you're more certain about the positions of stealthy enemy platforms, you can move in and make more aggressive plays. Kitakami's torpedoes reload fast enough that you're usually keeping the enemy team on their toes at all times, but that also means that they're alert. They're always watching for the next salvo of underwater danger noodles, so it can be difficult to get as many hits as you might want. Kitakami does have guns, and you should use them when you're safe to do so, either as you break line of sight by going behind an island, or when you're running your exhaust smoke generator. The 3-second main battery reload can actually be used to add up to a semi-significant amount of damage, especially for targets that you've already devastated with a massive torpedo salvo. And the 11% fire chance is nothing to sneeze at either. I think that this ship is fairly easy to play, and the playstyle, though slightly modified, is based on ships that you're probably already familiar with. I'm going to give her a 4 in this category. If you know how to perform in a ship like Shimakaze or Daring or Yugamo, Chungmu, or even Asashio, then you have some idea of how to play Kitakami. You'll just have to adapt that strategy to work with a platform that has a 7.9 kilometer concealment and a 4-minute speed boost, and of course, the exhaust smoke generator. Is Kitakami fun to play? Yeah, I mean, I think she is. Of course, I like destroyer play, so, your mileage may vary, but I think she provides a really cool combination of torpedo output, exhaust smoke generator, and a long-running speed boost, and I don't think that combination exists in any other ship in the game. None of the components, of course, are new, by the way. These are all things we have on other ships. Both Jinan and Brisbane can launch an unholy number of torpedoes. Napoli and Venezia can travel safely obscured in their own exhaust smoke at high speeds, and there are plenty of ships with a 15% speed boost that lasts a good long while. By putting these 3 components on a light cruiser that has a pretty darn small profile and a sub 8 kilometer detection range, it's kind of a new experience, even though it's comprised of components that we're already very familiar with. I think that a lot of people are hoping to watch videos like this one, not just mine, but others on YouTube as well, and get advice on whether or not they should buy Kitakami. But the truth is, there's absolutely no one true correct answer to that question. If you're asking me if the ship is powerful enough to justify the cost, the answer is no. There's no ship is. There's no ship in World of Warships that is powerful enough, that is fun enough or cool enough to justify what they're charging for the ship in terms of resources. If you bought it with just steel, that's 136,000 steel. The same steel would buy you 5, maybe 4 tier 10 ships in the armory. These are ships that are known to be good. For less than 136,000 steel, you could buy Borgonia, Mecklenburg, Stalingrad, Gato, and Vallejo. Now, Vallejo's a tier 9, but you could buy all those ships without using a coupon. If you spent 1.52 million coal, that would get you up to stage 80, which would unlock Kitakami. That would buy you basically 6 top-tier coal ships. For that sum, you could pick up the Black, Malta, Brisbane, Napoli, Moskva, and Marco Polo. Again, Marco Polo's a 9, but you still wouldn't have to use any coupons to get all of those ships. If you were going to do it with all research points, you could scoop up Ohio, Colbert, and Vampire, and you'd still have 18,000 research points left over. In my opinion, there's no single ship in this game that is worth the cost of resources that they're charging for Kitakami. To be fair, you'll not just get Kitakami if you buy her, you'll get 4 ships from the salvage event, not just 1. And that's because you'll get the tier 6 Ellie, the tier 7 Ferruccio, and the tier 10 Defense along the way. But do these ships add up Do they stack up? Do they compare to the lists I just gave you a second ago? Only one of those ships is top tier, and that's if you consider tier 10 top tier. And only time will tell if any of these ships earn a place of prominence in this game's hall of ships that we revere way too much. If you decide to go for Kitakami and you don't have everything else in the game already, then you're choosing to spend resources on ships that might be great instead of well-regarded ships that have already cemented their strong reputations in this community. I am not saying all of this to tell you that getting Kitakami is a bad idea. I am planning on getting her. I am basically camped out in front of the Wargaming store like some guy trying to get the latest pair of limited edition Jordans. Now, some of you have every single ship in World of Warships already, and you are sitting on a Scrooge McDuck-style mountain of resources. And to you, I say the Kitakami is waiting. It's a curiosity. It's a trinket. It's, why not? Right? Why wouldn't you get it? There's going to be a certain amount of exclusivity that will come with having this ship, at least for a couple of years. Now, I don't believe it's going to be like Iwaki Alpha rare. I don't think it's going to be Arkansas B rare. It's been 8 years since World of Warships launched in 2015, and that's a long time for a lot of people to become World of Warships millionaires and be able to afford to buy this thing. If you have the resources, if you want to get it, go for it. Don't let anybody hassle you in all chat for being a whale or a fool or anything. Don't let anybody tell you that Jinan is better. You should have just got Jinan. Jinan doesn't do what Kitakami does. It's a different boat. And to be fair to Jinan, Kitakami can't do what Jinan does. It's a different boat. Don't let anybody tell you that ship blows up when it's looked at. Of course it does. It is not the first ship in this game to blow up when it's looked at, and it will not be the last. I'm looking at you, Smolensk, Atlanta, Brisbane, Jinan, Austin. The list goes on. Listen, if Kitakami sounds fun for you, if you can afford it, just go get it. Some of you are gonna love this thing, and some of you are gonna roll your eyes every time you see one in battle, and I think both of those opinions are great. There's 600 ships in this game. If we all liked the same ones, we'd all have the same ones. And sometimes that's true. And this boat is different enough and weird enough that it's not for everyone. And I actually think that's cool. By the end of January, you are going to be in a match with some nerd who has 300 battles in Kitakami. Mark my words. Battle Slapper 69-420 Blazin is going to love this thing. I assume that's a real person. The ship is kind of fun. If it sounds fun to you, you should get it. Is it worth the resources? No. If you have the resources and you want to spend them on it, do it. It'll be totally dumb and awesome. That's it. What about competitive? Probably not. For my commander build, I've gone with Last Stand. I always want my engine and rudder to work at least a little bit because being stationary is a good way to be dead in Kitakami. I've gone with Consumable Specialist here. This is going to bring my smoke and my speed boost back quicker from cooldown, and I use those tools to stay alive, so I think they're really valuable. Swift Fish makes the torpedoes go faster. The faster your torps go, the easier they are to hit with. And then Fill the Tubes. I can't imagine any Kitakami build that does not include Fill the Tubes. You're going to take this skill. I've been going with Pack-a-Punch here for the extra torpedo damage. If you're having a hard time staying alive, one way to maybe mitigate that would be to swap this way. This is an aggressive attack skill, but you could swap that out for Consumables Enhancements, which makes your smoke and your speed run even longer, and for incoming fire alert, so you know when those shots are coming and you can make a maneuver to get out of the way. I've also gone with Adrenaline Rush. I think this is probably a must-have for any Kitakami build. I've gone with Superintendent. Gives me another heal, another smoke, and another speed boost. Definitely a highly recommended skill. I've gone with Survivability Expert, which adds 4,500 hit points to this ship. And then finally, Concealment Expert to keep my ship out of sight. For my upgrades on Kitakami, I've gone with Main Armaments Modification 1, just to keep the guns and torpedo launchers working. Engine Boost Modification 1, I think is really great. I like having my speed boost last for a really long time, and this is one way to do that. If I wasn't going to buy this module for coal, I would do Engine Room Protection instead. In this category, I've gone with Torpedo Tubes Modification 1, and what this does is increase my torpedo speed, but also counteracts some of the negative for torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated down here on Torp Tube Modification 2. Now, one could argue that you have 10 torpedo tubes, and if you lose one or two of them in a battle, honestly, who cares? And if you're of that mind, you might consider going with Smoke Generator Mod 1. This would make your smoke generator action time go up by 20%, which is excellent because your action time is how long it puffs. And with an exhaust smoke generator, that's pretty great. I haven't tried this yet, but it seems like kind of a funky thing to try. I've also gone with steering gears modification 1. I would have gone with acceleration, whatever the acceleration one is called, but it's not available on Kitakami, so we've gone with steering gears instead. In slot 5, I've gone with concealment systems modification to make myself as stealthy as possible, and we already previewed this. In slot 6, torpedo tube modification to reduce my reload time by 15%. So that is it. That's the hot take on Kitakami. What do you think? Are you going to get a bulldozer and push all your coal and steel towards Wargaming's house and get this ship, or are you going to let it go and just say, you know what, not for me, bro? I think both of those are perfectly rational options. It just depends on if you think this kind of weird cruiser destroyer even makes sense for you. Her scores came in a little bit low when compared to other cruisers at her tier and even a couple of tiers down, and that's partly because she did so poorly on AA with a score of 0, the first 0 I've ever given to any ship ever in a hot take, as well as not having any hydros, not having any radar, which is usually one of those is present on a cruiser, and that buoys those scores up a little bit. She is, of course, scored like she's scored. I think that's fine. Remember, these scores are not scientific, really. They're just a framework that we use to talk about the ships. The question I have for you, though, is, like I said, are you going to get it? I am going to get Kitakami. If you want to see her in operation, come by the stream over at twitch.tv/ClydePlaysLive. As soon as she's available, I will have her, and we will play her on stream for you. I'd love to know what you guys think. Obviously, keep things civil and classy down there in the comments. We don't need to be arguing, but we love having World of Warships discussion. I'll try to answer as many of those comments as I can. Until then, take care of each other, be cool, be nice, and we'll see you in our next video, live stream, or battle captains. Take care. I'd like to think that you're here and you're in for a treat. You're obviously here. That's a given, because you can hear me unspotted fairly easily and focus on torpedo and that's just written wrong. Why are those extra words in there, Clyde? The little 140 millimeter guns only boost your detection range to 4.3 kilometers. I put a weird space in there and I hated that.